just went live, so I'm gonna do my spiel.
Okay, let's go.
It's cool.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, it looks like we're live. So welcome to the my Unity game dev live stream. Still, I will endlessly be workshopping that name. I always tack another word onto it, but we'll find it. My name's Charles with Infallible Code, and I'm joined today by Dapper Dino. Nathan,
Yeah.
you'll know him as Dapper Dino. And today we're just going to chat about, game dev, programming, and Unity, which is pretty much what both of our channels are about. Um,
Yep. So
so
hopefully we have quite a big following of people with plenty of questions.
yeah, so that definitely engage us in the chat. We'll be checking that chat. I have it open here, and if you have any questions while we get the discussion going, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will be glad to talk about them and answer and discuss with you. One day I want to have this be like a call-in show. Get some viewer call-ins here, and I think that would be really cool. But for now, you're gonna have to stick to the chat.
Yeah, get someone in Zoom and just have a nice discussion about game dev.
Yeah, that'd be cool. In fact, I was actually watching I forget who it was, but I was watching a live streamer the other day and on YouTube, and yeah, he was having people call in on Skype. But yeah, that'd be kind of neat to have people join in. So, all right, how you holding up with the quarantine, man? I think that's like the topic on the
Yeah.
forefront of everyone's brains.
That's what everyone wants to hear about. Actually, no, that's what no one wants to hear about anymore. Honestly, I'm sick of going downstairs, people watching it on the news. It's like that's the only thing that's been on in the last 2 months.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid. It really is.
Yeah.
But I think everyone's kind of get to that point where getting a little stir crazy.
Yeah. I think I'm handling it kind of well, but that's due to the nature of, being an introvert, coding, programming, gaming. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like we're all game developers and programmers, and I think that kind of lends itself to just like kind of being happy, just hanging out.
Preparing our whole lives, yeah.
Yeah, right. We've been preparing our whole lives.
So Roman's in my chat. Hello. What was your life like before quarantine? Yeah, this is the story we'll be telling our children.
That's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of people getting affected, like people in their senior year of high school, and trying to graduate from university, and now they're doing it from home. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I missed that by 1 year. Otherwise, I would have had my exams cancelled. I didn't actually want my exams cancelled. I'm happy I got through everything this year, last year even. Because my friends now are having to rely on like predicted grades. Like my friends that are a year younger, and they don't know if they're going to uni and stuff. They don't get to have a go at exams. It's just cancelled for them.
Yeah, I'm sure some people are happy about that, and some people aren't.
Yeah, let's just rename this a quarantine group chat or stream.
Right.
Some COVID thing, because that's currently all we've said.
I see in the chat, Cody says nerds are okay with this lifestyle. Yeah, like what was my life before quarantine? You're looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing's changed.
But to bring it back to game dev, hopefully we're using this time to stop procrastinating. I know I've probably created like 4 more prototype projects that'll probably never get done, but it's been interesting. You working on any projects now?
I've kind of like in my free time got two projects / games I'm working on. One's a multiplayer, and that's because I'm learning multiplayer, trying to get quite familiar with all that stuff. People want to see it on the channel as well, like multiplayer tutorials, because it's quite few on YouTube.
I get a lot of requests for multiplayer too.
Yeah, and there's so many different multiplayer frameworks, and it's not like there's one built into Unity that's actually good. So yeah, it's all
not
about
yet anyway. Hopefully they're working on something.
Yeah. I was at the Unity event and I was asking them about multiplayer, and they said literally, don't use the UNet built-in multiplayer. They just told us don't use it, and that's their own words.
Yeah. Well, isn't there that multiplayer? I don't know if would you call it a framework or library that's kind of based on UNet. Like some people have kind of taken it and
Mirror. That's
that's the one. Mirror.
That's what I'm using. It's really good. Yeah.
Cool.
And I'm in the Discord server, and it's helping a lot with various questions I have. And they really want to help me because they know I'm making content about it. So if I know what I'm on about and I do good videos about it, it helps them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So there's still some weird things with game dev. The weirdest, not game dev, like multiplayer.
Right.
The biggest problem I've had is changing scenes, making sure that's all like synced up. By default, it's synced up when you change scene on the server. You change scene on all clients. But then you get this problem where if someone perhaps joins later, you don't want them to just like, I guess, snap into the scene. You might want a loading screen. And in
Right.
loading screens, if I tell all the clients, go do your loading screen, they might take various times to finish their loading screen because, by the time you've told someone with 100 ping to do it, they're going to finish it later. So the whole changing scenes and making sure everyone's doing it and making sure everyone's ready before you start the match.
Yeah.
But you can't just wait for everyone to connect, because what if someone's internet goes out? Then you'll just never finish the loading screen. So then you need to have like
Because it's all synced
a
up like
max
that.
amount of time. You need to have it so like if the loading screen takes longer than 2 minutes or something, just kick that other player or something.
Interesting.
There's so many little things that you have to think about with multiplayer.
Yeah.
So my second project is just some single player stuff I'm working on. It's a bit easier to wrap my head around. Yeah, just I like making RPG mechanics, even if I'm not making an actual RPG. I just like building like inventory systems, quest
Yeah,
systems,
those
that
mechanics are
kind of stuff.
fun. They're more
Yeah.
complex, so it requires you to like kind of tool around with it a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's when I usually think about, I wonder what this would be like with ECS.
Oh yeah.
Some people have said like pure ECS will never be a thing, because imagine trying to do an inventory system with ECS. I've never tried. I can't imagine it being like that bad, because the one problem we have right now is if you want a really good item system in a game and you want items, people make an item class and then they make a weapon class that inherits. They make a consumable class that inherits. And then what if you want, a consumable weapon? What if you want a gingerbread sword? Is the example I used. Maybe if you attack with it, it's a weapon, but you can also right-click, consume it, and you restore some health. Can't really do that now. You have to then make this wacky inheritance tree.
Yeah,
And
well,
you
yeah,
just
it's composition, so you got to take your entity and give it like the interactable component and the healing component or whatever the case may be. But yeah, honestly, my thing with ECS is I just can't. I mean, so far, I actually really like ECS as a design, like an architectural design pattern, and I can get on board with it. It's just it you have to go all in. You know what I mean? Like if you use ECS, like that is your entire project as far as how you're going to architect it moving forward. And I struggle with it because you lose all the great object oriented programming, design patterns, the solid principles will pretty much go out the window, and those things that really lend themselves to like scalability, maintainability. It's hard, it's something that's so new that I don't think a lot of folks know what it looks like in the long term. Like if you create a project, what does it look like 6 months down the line when it really starts to grow? And then the other thing is tooling. If you
no
want
assets for it or anything.
no assets, you want to create content for your game. Like for instance, you want to start adding items. How do you do it? Right now, you got to actually go into the code and create entities. I mean, I know they're working on it, but yeah, I don't know. It's hard to see where that's
That's what.
yeah, no, when that's actually gonna really take hold, or if it's gonna take hold because of those things.
Well, they said it's going to come out of preview in 2020.1.
Okay.
And they're doing 2 big releases a year now rather than 3. So I'm assuming that's going to be halfway through the year. We'll probably do, 2020.1. I mean, it's out now in beta. I've not actually tried the 2020.1 beta. But
Yeah, me
yeah,
neither.
when it comes out of preview, that's them saying this is ready for use in actual games. But I'm still like trying to think. There's so many parts of a game right now. When you go to make it, there's always I guess you'd say, an object-oriented solution.
Right.
But right now, there's no way you can make a game in complete pure ECS where you don't write any mono behaviors or anything.
Right.
I'm trying to think like UI, for example. They've got that new UI framework they're working on. I've not messed with it, and apparently it works in both object-oriented and ECS, but I have no idea what that means. Yeah, it's all, a bit hazy right now. I'm trying to learn about it, but I'm not going to drop whatever else I'm doing now. I'm not going to say any project from now on is ECS, because I know I'll never get anything done.
Yeah, yeah. Your productivity goes out the window because you're trying to relearn pretty much everything.
As soon as I see something new about ECS and I'm like, oh, that answers a lot of questions that I had, then I might do a video on it. I've done some videos in the past showing the huge benefits of how systems are kind of like sequenced.
Yeah.
So like the whole this system handles dealing damage, and then this system handles taking damage. So if you have health and a like damage buffer, then we loop over everything in the damage buffer and reduce it from the health. And then it's like, what if I want a damage resistance system? Well, that system kind of butts in before the one that handles taking damage, and it loops over the damage buffer and just reduces the damage.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've like messed with buffers. If not, then I
A
might have
little
just
bit. No, yeah,
yeah.
it's definitely one of the more advanced topics.
Yeah, that's I'm in like the dots like Slack channel thing, because there's not much. If you just Google dot stuff, you won't find much about it really.
Yeah.
There's the forums. One problem I have with the Unity forums, maybe I'm just dumb. I can't like. Is there a search feature? Because I might
Yeah.
go onto like the dots forums and I want to search a specific thing,
Yeah,
but
you can. It's not very intuitive. You're not dumb. Don't worry. The
yeah.
forum is. I've struggled to find even my own posts because I used to post on there a lot, and it's the filtering isn't the best.
Yeah.
But
I see
yeah,
these class names in dots and it's like 10 words long. I'm like, it's gonna stay away from that. Probably shouldn't be using it if it's 10 words long. It's yeah, They said over time, obviously, they want to make it more user friendly, and right now they're not expecting everyone to be using it.
right.
But that's where they're heading. There's no point in them putting in all this effort and making teams to work on developing it if no one's going to use it.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the future of it, but not right now. Like
It'll
not
be
using it right
interesting to
now.
see how that comes into play. The other thing you mentioned, which I'm really actually interested in, is the UI elements. I see my
Yeah.
chat's talking about it. I really like because when I first got into development, I came in like learning JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Like this was back in like 2004, and so I like I'm very familiar with that. You like applying style sheets to things like you working with XML, and that's where their UI elements. That's basically what it's sort of based on. They have their own sort of XML unit. I think it's like UXML, Unity XML,
Yeah.
and then you design your layouts like that, your UIs, and then you can apply style sheets. I don't know. I think that's like a really good approach to UI in general, as opposed to like just dragging things into the scene and treating them like game objects.
Yeah, have you noticed they have like an actual kind of toolbox where you can drag those things in anyway, but then like
Yeah.
it gives you the code as well.
Hmm.
So it's like the two-way editing. So it's a lot faster to start chucking everything in just by dragging it in. And then once you're there, you realize, this needs to be tweaked. Let's change the code a bit.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to using it. It's kind of like, do you know what Blazor is?
Yeah. I've used Blazor.
Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty new, right?
yeah, that's what our website is actually made with.
Oh, cool.
We just dove straight in because the person I'm like working with,
Hmm.
he came from an ASP.NET background, and he was like, "Oh, there's this new thing. It's Blazor." And whenever you hear someone in like the computer science area say, "Oh, there's this new thing. We should use it,"
Of
it's
course.
usually a bit like, let's wait
Let's
and see."
not.
But honestly, yeah, we started using it at the beginning. There were a few hiccups with things that we had problems with. Went on GitHub and just saw there were issues that were pending by Microsoft. So we're like, well, we have to wait.
Yeah.
But now, for the last few months, we've not had any problems with trying to do something that doesn't exist. And Blazor reminds me a lot of this because, I mean, all it is just you have components,
Hmm.
but the components are just HTML really. And then you write your logic in C# code. And I assume that's almost what they're going for because,
Yeah.
okay, if you've got UI now, and let's say you have a button, right, with the new UI elements, how do you do something on click, for example? How do you run some code? I've never used it. I want to try. I think
I think,
maybe even after the stream, I might go try it because it'll be in the 2020 beta, right?
yeah, it should be in there. I'd be interested to give it a shot too. Yeah, I'm not really sure how they handle that, but I imagine it's like a similar paradigm to like how Blazor is. But what I really like about it is it helps you really separate. If they do take that approach, it really helps you separate your UI logic from your like your game logic. And I think
Yeah,
that separation, like that line gets really blurry right now with how you handle UI and Unity in general. I mean, really it gets blurry because there's no distinction unless you make the distinction as the programmer. And I know a lot of people love to say, oh, how do you use MVC in Unity? They slap a big architectural pattern on top of it. But I mean, the spirit is there, like separating your UI logic. Like you should have a button that isn't really aware of your game logic but can still affect it, you know what I mean? And that's where it's,
yeah,
I think having something like UI elements, and if they do something where they really put that separation in place, I think it's going to be super valuable because it's going to help people, figure out what the approach is. Whereas right now the approach is, hey, do whatever you want, you know?
yeah. When I started making UI, it would be something like the player's health is a singleton or something dumb. And then the UI every frame in the update would be like, go grab the player's health, update the UI, go grab the player's health, update the UI.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice any problems with it at first because it works, you know. That's what people think, like, oh, this is great because it works. And then after a while, like now, I actually do it by health not being a singleton, just simply dragged in by reference because it's kind of what Unity's helping you with. And then I just use events to update because obviously, if you only take damage, if you're not in a fight, you're not taking any damage for ages. And if you're in a fight, you don't take it every frame. You take damage maybe every second or two. Depends how insanely, like, how many enemies are on your game or what kind of game it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, events are definitely the way to go for that. Just as long as you remember to unsubscribe from your events, don't cause any memory leaks or problems. Or I've had problems where events don't get unsubscribed, but then they get subscribed again. So then I've got like 3 calls to the same method. And yeah, what was the problem I had a long time ago? I think I had something happen on destroy or something, and I don't usually use on destroy, and I messed something up to the point where the enemy died, like a ragdoll spawned, but the actual enemy as well didn't get destroyed. So now there's like the enemy that I killed and then a ragdoll of the enemy, and but because they were overlapping, they like had the rigid body problem where they just push out from each other and just like fly off into the distance.
Those
and
are
it's
always
funny
fun to
for like
have.
a minute, and then you have to go and fix it. Yeah. Hi guys, how do you recommend I learn Unity? I'm new, like super new.
New to
Do
Unity?
we want to explain?
Well,
how,
what kind of? I'm curious to know what kind of background. Like, do you have any programming experience? Are you just completely brand new to Unity game development in general? That would be the first
True.
question, I think.
Yeah. If people have done coding before, then it's not as hard to get into it.
Well, it depends. I think it depends on what your coding background is. I think because
Yeah,
if you come from like making like business applications, those are the type of people that probably come through and say, oh, how do I apply like MVC to Unity? And it's like, it's not really. Or
yeah.
I guess if you're a functional programmer, you might have a different approach to it as well.
Yeah, certain patterns you can't really force into game dev because if you do, it'll end up biting you back. Like
Yeah, you can try. Many people have.
they said they are brand new, but they know a little bit of C# and C++. So I
Okay.
mean that still helps, like
Yeah.
knowing syntax stuff first and knowing like at least looking at some C# code, understanding that sets that variable and that calls that function. And yeah, knowing the basic syntax does help. And then from there, it's really I find I can't learn just by sitting down and watching stuff. I have to have my own project open. I need to like try working through something, and then I get stuck.
Yeah.
I might get stuck in the first 10 seconds. It doesn't matter. As soon as I get stuck, then I go Googling. There'll either be a video on it from one of my favorite YouTubers, or there'll be some forum post, some person complaining about this problem, and then someone helping them.
Yeah.
Yeah, like even if your searches are like, how do I make, and then very generic thing in Unity, if someone asks, how do I make health system, or how do I make player take damage, you'll get millions of different responses because every game is different. Start off with something simple. Definitely, make some cookie clicker game or something that is like one input and something happens and you got some UI and you got some score and you can feel good about beating a high score. Maybe storing high score, that's not hard to do with player prefs if you're keeping it simple.
Yeah, I think that's what you're saying is the heart of the answer that I always give, which is start small, get from start to finish though. Like choose a little, like rewrite tic-tac-toe or Pac-Man
games that already
or
exist.
Snake. Yeah, games that exist, just take them. Don't, because like if you just go in and you're like, oh, I've got an idea for an RPG that's like Skyrim, and then you start getting in there and you have to make design decisions and like you have to make decisions about the mechanics of your game. But if you just pick something that's small, that already has the rules well defined, then you can focus on the learning part. You know what I mean? It's like, I guess if you're learning how to become an artist, you're not going to start by painting something from memory. You're going to start by maybe drawing figures, like trying to draw an apple on a table, something that is there, exists. And what you're doing at that point is I forget, it's like, there's like the Dreyfus model of learning. I forget exactly what it's called, but at that point you're just repeating and you're building things like muscle memory. You're building things like the mental image of how all the pieces fit in. And I think after you do that for quite a while, you can start working on like maybe your own little prototypes. Maybe you have your own little ideas that spin off of the games that you create. That's another good thing too, is like if you make something like Snake, and you get from start to finish, then you can say, oh, I'm going to add my own feature, like add bombs to it or something like that.
I
Or
was
like,
about to say the same thing. Yeah.
yeah, right. So I think that would be the approach from a high level. If you're trying to learn anything, just try to copy and repeat other things that already exist, because that's going to help you build that mental model. The things like muscle memory, like I mentioned, that are going to help you enable you to build what you actually want to make, which I'm sure you have plenty. Everyone has good game ideas, but it's the execution that is the hard part.
Like, don't get rid of your good ideas, just maybe hold back on them
Definitely
right away, because definitely spend some time planning them out. But the best thing about making, for example, a Snake clone is the game's already there. You know all the rules. You don't have to kind of waste time thinking about that. You can start building, and once you know how to make that kind of game, then when you come to make your own game, it should be a lot easier, because you'll be used to using certain things in Unity. Like, you'll be familiar with the UI to update the score in Snake, the input to change the direction, the transform to actually move the snake around, colliders to pick up the apple or whatever. What even is it in Snake? I guess it depends, doesn't it?
I don't know. Are there even pickups in Snake?
Yeah, you pick up the thing.
Oh,
and then
that's
you get
right.
that is the game.
That is the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you just pick up little white
Circles.
dots.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? There's also a lot of meta things. Like, for instance, like opening your project, figuring out what your folder structure is, things like what code editor do you use. There's like this weird little meta things, like just understanding how to work with a tool.
Yeah.
I can speak to my experience with like Photoshop, because for us, we're YouTubers, so we're like, I want to make thumbnails for my channel, right? Oh, so I'm gonna have to learn Photoshop. So then you go in and you start learning how to do that, but then there's all this meta things about Photoshop, like which layout do I use? Do I use the web one, the graphics one? Like, how do I work with layers? And I think that really does kind of relate back to Unity or any software that you need to learn. You need to learn the tool, because Unity is just a tool. You can make a game using anything else. And I imagine you're using Unity to make games. Who knows?
Yeah.
People could use them to make. I think you can make simulations,
Films and stuff.
films. Yeah, short films.
Yeah, but whenever I open a new Unity project, I have kind of like this process I go through before I start making anything. I immediately go to like the player settings and tweak things. I go to the not the asset store. I go to the package manager, and I always just uninstall the packages that are pre-installed that I don't use.
That bloatware.
Like certain like Visual Studio Code editor, or like editor extension. There's something in there for that. Sometimes like the timeline thing. I don't know why timeline's pre-installed. There's certain other things that should be, in my opinion, but that's something that shouldn't be, but it is. Because I understand timeline is for like cinematics and scheduling, kind of like, well,
you can use it. I actually used it recently in a VR project. I had never used it before, but I always understood what it could do.
I've only used it once or twice, so I'm not very familiar with how it all works.
So I have this VR project where basically it was basically something that's like to demonstrate an actual product. It was, believe it or not, it's for like a business case for my company.
Nice.
And so, yeah, basically my company, one of the products we make is this kiosk for checking in visitors and like lobbies. And so we recreated the kiosk in VR so we can show people at conferences, like just because these kiosks go into places like power plants and things like that where we can't really demonstrate it. So we created like an industrial environment and like, anyway, when you first start, we knew that our user would be kind of like older folks who work in the power industry, and like they don't know how to use VR. They don't know how to click around and move. So we're like, okay, we'll put the headset on them, and the only thing they have to do is punch a button. And when they punch a button, we're going to move them into place in front of this kiosk so that they could use it. And so we use timeline for that. And then the other part of it was, once they use the kiosk to like log in, it's supposed to take them through like a turnstile, like a full body turnstile. So then we use timeline to like walk them through and like play a sound bite. And it was really nice because I was the only one on my team who had ever used Unity. All the other guys on my team, you know, are just like back end developers, and they were able to like they were like adding sounds and like, you know, making things happen and like making little effects appear because, you know, with
It's
timeline,
quite intuitive, yeah.
yeah, it's really intuitive. It's just drag and drop, and it's just a little timeline that you say, okay, at this point, play this sound, you know, put the player here, and so it's pretty cool. I think it has its place for
I'm
certain
just having
things.
a look at my chat. I don't know if there's
Yeah,
anything you want to address in yours.
see a lot of familiar faces. Hey everyone, what's up, Jason? Oh, hospitals have used Unity and VR for to practice practicing surgery. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of simulation. Like, there's a lot of good business use cases for VR.
Yeah, or just Unity in general now. Like I see loads of things. You know, it's used for cars, like car. What do you call it? Like the shows where they or like the adverts for cars, where you know in adverts for cars they're obviously not cars most of the time. They're driving through these really like fake scenes. You know, these like usually animals like jumping across a bridge or something. I'm just thinking some crazy like car commercials I've seen. But a
Interesting.
lot of that's used in Unity for Unity. Then there's like Big Hero 6. They did some Unity crossover.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
totally. Pixar,
that's
I
yeah.
think did something.
And then obviously loads of game companies that in the past have used their own game engines for
Hmm.
their games are now using Unity for certain things. Like well, Blizzard have made Hearthstone in Unity, but in the past their stuff's all been in their own engines.
Yeah.
And then Riot Games have also made their card game in Hearth card game in Unity. There we
Hmm.
go. Yeah, Unity just seems to be the go-to for card games. But I guess one thing Unity wants, like their company, they don't want to be known as like for certain types of games. They want to be known for all types of games. You
Right.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's where they're going with all the high definition render pipeline stuff.
Hmm.
Because a lot of the time you play a game and you're like, this game was made in Unity. I have a feeling, you know, you just have that Unity feeling,
It
even if it
always
doesn't.
had that look. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like sometimes I've seen certain things. I've used Unreal only a tiny bit, and I can even recognize in a game like that button is pretty much the default button from Unreal. Yeah,
Yeah. You start
you can
seeing
just
assets
tell.
from the Unity asset store that you're like, hey, or like Unreal assets.
Yeah, I try and avoid like if I use assets, it's always going to be like tools or things like that. I never use like pre-made models or sound effects. I'm always like, even though I know I'll do it bad, I'll do it myself. You know. Uh,
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where I'm like that too, where if I'm doing my own personal side project, I just want to do it because I feel like typically when I'm like prototyping something, it's just for me to like kind of have fun and play around with it, and that's what I like to do. But it's interesting. I don't know if you've I think we've spoken about this, but have you done any like contracting work with Unity, like any paid projects?
Um, I've done. There's one in memory.
Hmm.
It was actually quite recent. I'm trying to think if there's any more. Well, the one I did, funnily enough, was using ECS.
Oh yeah, that's
Because someone wanted a like physics simulation,
mm.
and and then they were saying they tried to do it themselves using like normal Unity, what you call normal Unity, and they had problems with performance, and it just didn't really work very well.
Right.
So I was like, it's something so simple for ECS that like yes, I could use it because I didn't need any features they hadn't made yet or anything.
Right.
It was literally just kind of some built-in physics stuff. The only difference is because I was meant to be simulating air molecules, and um,
Hmm.
they're not meant to like their velocity is not meant to be reduced when they collide. But in Unity by default, no matter how you tweak the material settings, stuff always slows down after colliding. Like even if you put it on like full bounciness or whatever the different settings are,
It always slows down just a
you
little
still
bit.
lose some. Yeah. So I had to write it like some collision detection system that was whenever a entity with a particle tag
Hmm.
collided with something, I made sure that like just after it's done the collision, I make sure to set the velocity back to the same magnitude that it was at before. And then so effectively it collides, loses some speed, and then gets it back again.
Like
And it
immediately.
worked. Like yeah, it worked.
Interesting.
And yeah, I don't know. It was kind of a fun project, just messing around with dots and actually using it for something real.
Yeah.
It didn't look good. It wasn't meant to, but it was just a simulation. So yeah. Um,
That sounds pretty cool. Well, anyway, my point was that when you start, talking, bringing it back to like Unity assets and like, programming things yourself, like your physics system, I've noticed that like when it comes down to like, okay, I have a project that someone's commissioned me to do, and let's say it's something like my VR demo. In those cases, I was like way more inclined to just find things that were already done for me and just it's funny, like when I'm making my own prototype or my own project or like doing a tutorial, I will code everything myself. But when I was doing these projects, these commission projects, and when I do those sorts of things, I just find that I'm like a conductor, like I'm getting this piece, I'm getting that piece, and I'm putting them together. I'm getting these models, I'm sticking them in the scene. I'm less of a creator and more of like a composer, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
of objects, just to get the job done. And what's funny is like if I'm really honest with myself, at the end of the day, whether I code it and do everything myself, or I go and I grab a bunch of things and compose them that are like if I purchase assets and things like that, typically the outcome is generally close to the same end product, except one of them I spent way more time doing everything myself.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. It's interesting. If you ever seen like Thomas Brush,
Yeah.
um,
I've seen a little bit. Yeah.
so he's talked about this. It's like if you're creating your game, right? Or if you really are saying like, hey, I'm not doing this for the love of the craft. I'm trying to put something out there. Like I have an idea for a game and I want to get it out there. You really do want to get as much of the work done like outsourced as possible. Like you really are just sort of, I guess, like a business person where you're like, I'm delegating responsibilities. Like I have an artist doing work for me here, trying to, capture my vision, and then then I'm like purchasing assets and trying to make them all work together. So I don't know. It's interesting how you can look at game development from those two different approaches.
Yeah. I mean, when I work on projects, I've never finished a project to release on like Steam or anything. I've finished projects for game jams. So I've made some games, just never anything commercial, I guess. And in those game jams, I've always like done my own modeling and sound effects and stuff. Especially, I mean, a lot of the time that's the rule anyway. But
Right.
even
Yeah.
if the
With a game
rule's
jam
like,
for sure.
yeah, even if sometimes, I mean, I think the most recent Bracky's game jam was like you're allowed to use assets.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, because that's a rule, everyone can do it. It's kind of a even playing playground, right? Or
Mhm.
whatever the saying is. And the thing about like modeling is I will still have a go, and if I decide one day further down the line that I'm taking this seriously and I will release this game, then yeah, I'll outsource it. I don't
Yeah.
think I'll ever go to the asset store, because the problem is then you play two games and you're like, that's the exact same model I saw in the other game. I want it to at least feel unique, the experience. But yeah, I've what assets have I actually used frequently? I use Odin Inspector if I'm
Oh,
not
Odin's
doing it
great.
for, if it's not for like a tutorial, because otherwise people are like, hey, what's that thing that I can't use? And then I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
sorry, you have to buy
definitely.
it.
You got to keep it
Yeah,
as
I
pure
bought
as
it.
possible.
Yeah, I got it on a sale a while ago. I probably wouldn't buy it full price. Well, then again, I've used it enough to probably justify it. So yeah. Also, there's this thing I found recently called Alt Events. It's like a free asset someone's made. You can like
Alt events like ALT.
like no, alt, like ult.
Mm, mm,
It's like Unity events but just way better, because
mm.
it's, how do I explain,
I'm
what are the
looking at
main
it now. It looks interesting. It's
the
funny.
main
My
Yeah,
video
go on.
coming out this week is actually about Unity events. So maybe I'll have a follow up about old events. This looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm thinking of covering it. As I said, I mean, I think when I
Hey,
first
collab
messaged
video.
you, yeah, when I messaged you, like, was it a week or two ago now?
Yeah.
And the first thing you said was like, "Oh, I just watched your Unity events video." And the things, I've done one in the past, and that's the thing. From videos from about a year or two ago, I know I can do them better. I've learned more stuff. Maybe even something I said a while ago, I now contradict that because I know a better way of doing something.
Mhm.
So if people come to my channel and they're watching an old video on something I've got a new video for, I'd like recommend them watching the new one, because their concerns might be like answered.
Mm.
The thing with alt events is it allows you to call methods that have like multiple parameters, and
Yeah,
you
I
can
see that.
actually, you can use the return value from a function. So like, if you know how in Unity events you've got like a list of things you can call,
Hmm.
then let's say the first thing you call returns a bool, then the second thing you call takes in a bool. You can actually say like use the return from like step 1 in step 2.
Yeah, I
Now
see
normally
that.
if you wanted to do something like that, you would have to write custom code. So it's really good for prototyping. And I know people have problems with like the performance of Unity events, but it just really depends on how frequently it's being called. If it's something that's very, very infrequent and it saves you writing code to just design something in the inspector, then I mean, use this. Definitely like don't use this for stuff that gets called every frame or very, very often. They actually have a component in the asset which calls it's just literally a component that has Unity events just made for you that gets called on start, update, and I don't know if there's anything else. Maybe just on enable, on disable, the common callbacks.
Right.
Obviously, if you actually use the Unity event in the update, you probably notice some drop in FPS because it's not very good to use in update. Events in general in update is not recommended. The entire point is that they're not done every frame. That's why you use events, for infrequent things.
Right.
But yeah, I found using alt events is really good for UI stuff. Like, when you click a button, you want to call a method, but what if that method takes in 2 parameters? Well, one sec. I need to read the chat. You just take over for a sec.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just to kind of go off of what you're saying here, that I'm curious. One of the videos that I want to create soon is just about that topic of events and how they can be underperformant. And I always hear that, but I want to do a video where I actually open up the profiler and say, okay, we're actually gonna call this event every frame and see exactly, because I think that's one area of Unity that people don't are kind of hesitant to look at, is the profiler. And for me, I've done a lot of profiling in the past just because in my day job, like I have to profile because we have a lot of constraints. So I feel pretty comfortable in the Unity profiler, and I've actually brought it up in a couple videos. So I'd like to do a video and where just explain that concept. Like, look, events are used for that purpose of, look, it's not going to be called every frame, but you don't want to be like something like a health bar. You don't want to have to check the health value every single frame, because that it could add up or whatever. And I'd also like to show that in the profiler too. Like, look, this is what it looks like when you're calling it, like you're checking health every frame. And then this is what it looks like when you check the health with an event. And then maybe like do one where I'm like calling an event every frame and seeing how that actually spikes and, garbage collection or whatever gets affected by that. So
yeah, there are other benefits to events. Like, think about it. If you have in your health UI in the update, like go grab the health and display it here, then the problem you get is, what if the UI update gets called before your player's damage is registered? Yeah, you can use the late update, but then the problem is when you start putting things in late update, then you realize, oh, but this other thing has to happen after that. So this has to go in late update, but also happen after the other thing in late update, and there's no later update. So that's when you start realizing that's not what this is for. That's why with events, I mean, the downside is like, oh yeah, this health update event might get called twice in the same frame if you get hit by 2 things. But like, that's like a very rare circumstance. And even then, it handles it pretty well because it'll just, I don't know how the Unity UI thing works. Like, if you change some text value twice in the same frame, is that twice as expensive? Or does it just, when it comes over, I think when it comes to rendering UI, it'll just take whatever the value is. So
yeah, because it all happens in one pass. So it's like all that logic will happen, whether it happens once or twice. Once it gets to the UI, it'll only, update it once.
If you said update this text 1,000 times in a frame, it's not going to be that bad. I mean, you would never do that, but yeah.
You know what? I think that's a good, that'd be something interesting to just try, like just to put a loop and see.
Myth busting.
Oh yeah.
You start a myth busting series for Unity.
Performance
about, like, certain performance.
Yeah. Because I think people, some developers
get put off things a lot because they hear what the other people are saying.
Yeah. And they get concerned. Oh, is this going to be underperformed? I don't want to do it like this. And I find that your best bet is to probably just get it done, and then I don't want to say worry about performance later. But what I've heard in the past is like this is from a business standpoint, but it's like you worry about security first, you get the feature done, and then you optimize. That's kind of like the order of operations, at least in my line of business. And I think I could see where that, is applied to game development, although security isn't usually a concern of most folks, when it comes to, I guess, securing your save files with like binary or whatever. But
Well, the thing is, yeah, if you're doing single player games, I'm usually in the mindset of I don't care if they cheat because they're cheating themselves. You know, if it's single player, um, like if it's multiplayer online, then you don't store stuff on their PC. You know, you store it elsewhere
Right.
in a database away from their reach. But that's the point. You know, if I store the player save data, I might still just do some simple like serialization because that'll deter some people from going in.
Right.
But then again, it might be quite fun, you know, for a player to go to their save file and be like, oh, this, like they can easily read in English, like this is for their health, and then they just mess around and
Yeah, right.
that's where people start getting interested in like modding and adding modding capabilities to a game. That's
Mm.
something I've never done that
That'd
I
be
want to try
interesting
at some point.
to put it.
Oh,
Yeah, I've thought about
yeah,
that as well. Yeah, just to kind of see what does that look like as far as because you can expose that in so many different ways. Like I think I used to do modding for World of Warcraft, and I think they used like Lua was the scripting language that they used.
yeah, they
Lua.
do because I've got some add-ons and yeah, it's Lua. I've never used Lua, but I've seen
Hmm.
when doing the add-ons. Yeah,
And then you could use something like Roslyn and C Sharp, I think, to compile at runtime. And I don't know, it's not very performant, but
yeah,
it'd be interesting to see what that looks like modding for your own game.
yeah.
There's Unity assets. So that's one of those things where it's like for fun, like I would try to figure out how to do modding. But if it was like a commission project, I just go find a Unity asset that had that already built in.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, with the modding thing, like I'm imagining if you make a game and it's got like an item system. But well, actually, I'll stop there. Have you ever made like console command systems? Because that's something I've been quite interested in doing, and I've done before. Console commands, like
I
developer console stuff.
I have not. I just wanted to say real quick because I have such a huge delay on my chat that I keep seeing people
Yeah.
like Jason mentioning things, and I'm like, oh, I want to talk. I want to like
Yeah,
talk.
go
talk.
on. Just
Yeah,
say
yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
So he was saying back to like the security thing in a single player game and like wanting to have people like play around with the save file. If you didn't want people to play around with the save file, he mentioned that we should do a video on this one that you can do a simple hash and you can use a hash string hash on a text file to detect if the file has been changed externally.
Yeah,
So
I've seen games use that before. I think
yeah,
Undertale. The game calls you out basically if you've messed with files.
that's fun. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be kind of a cool video to do.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I have never covered on my channel is like saving. It could be cool.
Yeah, see, I've got videos on so many topics from a long time ago.
Hmm.
And usually when I think about doing it again, I'm thinking, oh, but I've already got this. No one's going to want to see it. But my new format of videos are a lot kind of different in a better way to my old ones. And yeah, I've learned a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've got Charles and Bartles now. I got to redo all my videos with those guys.
With the console commands thing, the reason I always use it in my projects now is
Mhm.
just because I'm imagining the reason it came into my mind was the modding. Because if
Right.
you create your own item for a game, right? You've got, let's say, an RPG, like a single player RPG, and you have some way on in Unity of storing. When I say database, I don't mean like an online database. I'm thinking
Like a
just
local.
yeah. I do like local databases with a scriptable object.
Hmm.
So I'll make a scriptable object called the item database, and it
Hmm.
just effectively has a list of items. There's some methods in there for like checking duplicate IDs and stuff to save me hassle because
Hmm.
each item needs its own ID. And then I'll go into console commands and be like /give 0 or like whatever, and it'll just say go to the item database and go grab the item with ID 0 and then do whatever with it.
Hmm.
So if someone was to add their own item modded to a game, by default the item won't be like in the game world. You won't be able to find it or get it. Usually in games with modded items, you have to spawn them in, like using developer
Hmm.
commands or something. So I don't even know, like if you made your own item, where would you put that data, like as a modded thing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, definitely. So the
Or a
way,
mods, yeah,
yeah,
a mods folder maybe.
I was exactly what I was gonna say is like you have some sort of folder like assets or models, like maybe it's some convention where you say, oh, you got to drag it into the assets folder, make one called weapons, like when you have a weapons folder, and then like or items or whatever type of. I guess it depends on the game, but I would imagine something like that. Just drag your
Yeah.
thing, and then when your game boots up, or maybe you have some sort of UI for it, like reload plugins or something. That's where it would actually like pull in, compile the code if it's Lua or some Roslyn stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah.
The only thing I've written like mods / plugins for is in Minecraft. I've messed around with a bit of that. And
Yeah.
well, if you've ever messed with mods in Minecraft, it's just a mods folder in your Minecraft
Yeah, I've used it before.
directory. Yeah, and I'm guessing they just have something to go and load from that directory. So
And then they have
I'm gonna try
hooks
that at some
too.
point in Unity.
So basically, you have to like, I guess, open up hooks in your code where you run the player code, or you run the mod code. So yeah, that'd be a really interesting topic. I guess the reason why I never go into topics like that, and I just have to figure out a way to get past this, is like, I don't want to, like, not to trash any of the YouTubers, but like whenever I see a video like, oh, how to make a mini map, I think like that's cool, but it's not really educational per se, because it's like making a mini map for game A is like way different than making a mini map for game B. Like there's so many different
Yeah.
considerations. Like I think if I make a tutorial about how to save your game, like it just depends. Like, what is your game? Is it an RPG? Is it Snake? Like, is it like
Yeah.
Angry Birds? Like there's so many different considerations based on the type of game.
Yeah, with saving, I see a lot of people say just use player press, and it's like, whoa, you do not want to use player press for a
Right.
game with more than like a high score and maybe like some simple settings.
Yeah. Right.
Like once you get past that, you definitely need to like make your own saving system. I've tried in the past, and so many of my saving systems failed. And I finally found one that kind of universally works, but it's one of those things where it can be overkill for a really simple game.
Mm.
I'm obviously not going to just go into like talking about the entire thing and how it works. I think I did a video on it or something like that. But yeah, I'm looking in the chat about what people are saying. And like, I need to write down interesting topics we've covered, or like discuss that we want to do videos on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, there's modding, saving. What else?
I think I would like turn it like something like saving or modding. I'd turn it into like almost like a series. Like, we're gonna do a save game for this type of game, and then I'm gonna show you to save for this type of game, and like, because then there's like, do you have? What are the requirements that you have? Like, do you need to save off to a server? Do you have to like make an API call and expose this, or save it to a database? Maybe you could do SQLite, and it could be an internal database. There's just so many ways, and player prefs. Yeah, someone in my chat's like really bad system IMO.
Like when you try and ask someone for help in game dev, or I guess coding in general, you have to be as specific as possible. Because if you just say, help me with saving, it's like, okay, I now need to know 10 more questions or 10 more answers before I can even start to help you. And they'll be like, why? You've built save systems before. It's like, yeah,
Sure,
but
but
I've made many different types based on
and I'm not about to write one for you, because my billable hours, like what I could be paid to write a save system for you, and the time it would take to make me. Yeah, it's just it's a hard one, and I love getting the questions like, how do you make an RPG in Unity? It's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of answer do you expect?
I try and avoid tutorials on those things. I used to do some like very specific tutorials, but now I do stuff like just explaining certain things in Unity, and then like I can explain at that time this could be used for XYZ.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than saying, let's make this very, very specific feature from this game, because then people will be like, but it doesn't work for my game. How do I make it work like this? I've had someone just join and be like, how do I make Battle Royale 1v100 or like 1v99? It's like, I don't know. It's like, give me like, a long time, and then maybe I can make something, that works. But even then, it's like people like that are the kind of people who haven't made a game before and they want to jump in the deep end.
Yeah.
You can
Definitely
tell when
want to
you're
jump in the
talking
deep
to
end there.
someone if they're like being sensible about it. And I'm not trying to blame the people who want to jump in the deep end, because I was probably like that.
Oh
as
yeah,
most people are.
I was too.
But I want to help them not make the same mistake I did.
Jason says something interesting about player prefs that I hadn't really considered before. He mentioned that it's good for like saving things like data flags. I guess for like persisting between scenes and things like that. We actually had a conversation about this the other day. I wonder. It's an interesting thought. Like I never considered like using player prefs to save data like that. Not really like settings or really hard like information that you need for the game per se, like the player's current run through a game, but like just things to save for the state of your game at that given time. Seems like a pretty interesting approach.
Yeah, like if I was saving, I don't know, my inventory or something,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't save the entire item
Oh God, no.
class, like model, just to save the ID. Then obviously there's questions about what if your sword has half durability, then you'll need to have some extra metadata for your like runtime data on the item.
Right.
But if it's just, let's just imagine that doesn't exist. If you've just got a sword and there's no durability, just save, ID 5 to your file. Then when you go to the next place and you're loading your inventory up, just load item ID 5. And the
Right.
benefit to that, as opposed to saving the entire item data, is imagine one day your player saves with that sword, and then they next day they download a patch, right? You've updated the game and you've buffed that weapon. Well, they don't have the buff version of the weapon, because
Yeah.
they're loading up this data from a file rather than just like loading from Unity.
Yeah.
There's plenty of benefits to just using an ID as well, because if you're making a multiplayer game and over the network you're saying, that player over there just equipped item ID 5, display it. Over the network, if you just say 5 as opposed to the entire weapon data, it's a lot faster and cheaper, I guess, if you
Yet another example of why it's so hard to teach something like saving, because it all just depends on what you need it for.
People think certain things are easier than they are. You'll get into something like, oh, this will take me half an hour, and then it's the next day and you're still like banging your head, why is this not working? Yeah.
And half the time the real answer is just grab an asset off the asset store. It'll save everything for you.
I'm still trying to kind of figure out not how to use the new input system. I've used it, and I've used it in many projects, but like with the old input system, see, the thing with it is you'd have to make, if you wanted to do a game properly, you need separate scripts for taking input. I guess you kind of still need that anyway, because if you put the input in your like attack script and then you want enemies that attack, then you need a separate version of that script that doesn't take input for the enemies. You need like the player's input that gets fed into a certain script, and then the enemy's like AI input that gets fed into that script. Because I try and make games where, like, obviously stuff's reusable, that's a good thing to do, but also to the point where the players and the enemies have pretty much the same code. I used to, when I started, do the whole player health, enemy health, player this, player enemy that, and then you get all this if logic, like, if this projectile hit an enemy but it was coming from a player, then do this.
All that control flow logic is that's a good code smell right there. If you have a bunch of if statements.
Yeah, just try and avoid ifs at all costs. Well, no, that's not true. There's definitely plenty of times where ifs are right, but if you're writing like
complicated control logic, that's what it is. It's if you've got control logic that's just taking one class through all these different routes and you got to follow it through. That's not fun for anybody.
The best feelings when you've written something and then you can't guarantee it, but you think, I won't have to come back here in the future, even when I want to add more stuff. That's kind of tied into interfaces in a way, or it just really depends on what. Certain things, making them dynamic rather than if I had a thing with items once. What was it I had? Well, yeah, it's just like casting it to loads of different types, saying if it's this, do this, and casting isn't exactly performant anyway. Never mind the hassle of having to remember to come back and add that case.
It's not very scalable.
No. Someone will say, why don't you do it this way? And I say to them, well, imagine if you had 100 different things. And they're like, yeah.
Well, that's always the thing too, like there's always going to be another way to do something, and whether it's better, what degree of better is it, and what situation. That's funny because that's really why I like doing the tutorials the way I do it now with my alter ego, because like it lets me have him say, but what, like I try to get ahead of the comments with he exemplifies anyone who's going to be in my comment section basically. Asking, well, isn't this not performant? Like, why would I do this? And that's where Charles can be like, well, yeah, sure, that's definitely a consideration. Thanks for bringing that up. But for now, for this particular case, we're just going to do it like this. That's one example.
That's one thing you've got to balance when making tutorials is, do you write really good code where quite often you need to write more code to get it kind of working? Or do you do the really quick, dirty way where it works really quickly, but then if you actually want to use it in a game, you're kind of screwed?
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of things where usually beginner tutorials, you don't want to confuse them with like design patterns if it's like a really simple beginner thing. But then the problem is, I kind of feel bad if I ever do that, because then I know, this person's going to try using that in their own game, and they're going to have the pains that I've had from watching other people's tutorials. They might write the code in such a way that, yes, it works perfectly for this one case with no other systems or mechanics or anything.
Yeah.
As soon as you start implementing it with other things, you'll have to redo it all pretty much. Like you said with the mini-map system, it could just be a top-down camera, you're done. Or it might be a mini-map system where you discover like the map as you explore. Maybe you can draw on the mini-map. Every game does it differently, and you can't do a tutorial how to make a mini. I mean, you can. I think I've even done it. Honestly, I'm gonna say I think I've done that. But
I'm gonna do one just for fun now.
Yeah, because people want to know how to make those kind of things, and I think most people, the huge majority, don't care that the way you do it isn't exactly how they want to do it. They just want to know kind of like a way to do it.
Yeah.
Like kind of how do I do this? And then once they've got that, then they can start doing it themselves, like changing it, or adding this extra thing to it.
And I think that there is definitely an audience that, and I find myself like trying to think of an example here, like something that's completely outside of like photography. Like I'll watch a video about photography, how to set up your, like, this is a terrible example, but basically like watching someone teach how to like take a photo with set up the aperture for something. I'm not a photographer, you know what I mean? Like I don't go out and take pictures of anything, but I find it interesting when when I'm looking at photos, I can think, oh, I have some idea of how this might have been taken, how the lighting was set up, like I'll watch videos on like people setting up lighting, and it's like, I'm not doing that, am I ever really? So I think there is some audience that's just like, hey, this guy makes videos about game development. I'm not a game developer, but here's a video about how to make a mini map. I want to watch that, like it's I think it can be fun for some people, and I think that's where those videos, the problem is that not the problem, but like I know that you and we've positioned our channels to be educational, like specifically. So when we go create a video on how to make a mini map, we're like, I got to educate people. I'm not just doing this for entertainment right now. And I think that's where we probably get hung up on, like, how do I frame this in a way that's going to be the most provide the most educational value? And that's where I always struggle. And why most of the ideas I have go to the wayside, because it's like, how am I going to teach this? Like, how could I possibly cover this if not with like a 10-part series?
Like the thing with series, people get bored quick, and they don't like waiting. If you, and then the other thing is people get annoyed if you don't commit to it. And I understand there is that expectation, right? That if you start a series, you're going to finish it, but plenty of things can happen, right? Like people lose interest to the point where you might have started with 1,000 views on the first one, and the final one's getting like 50 views, and you're like, I know there'll be some people who really want to keep going, but at the end of the day, like pretty much no one wants that. And sadly, with YouTube, you kind of have to like go with the majority, because
well, it's a good barometer. It's a good barometer to know like what what content you should be making, I think.
That's why I've tried to go more for the one-off tutorials. Like even if I do a series, they're not connected really. So like I've got a series about like bite-sized Unity stuff, so it's explaining what coroutines are and how to use them, the Unity callbacks, and like it's all about basically what this thing is, where you should use, like not where you should, but where you can use it, or like where it's commonly used, and then like a code example, right? Of like, okay, here's me using it and it works, and hopefully you can use it in your own thing. So I did one yesterday on extension methods. So like obviously we can't modify rigid body methods, we can't like make our own, but at least you can make an extension method, because especially if you're I know you've done a video on it in the past as well, about making your own like packages to use across multiple projects. That's where extension methods are useful, because there's certain bits of code that I'm having to remember to write in every single project, because I come across the same things where it's like for example, for a certain transform, you might want to like get rid of all the child game objects. As far as I'm aware, that's not a built-in thing. The way you do it is maybe you have to loop over it and say make like a for each loop, for each transform, child, and thingy, destroy, whatever. And it's only a few extra lines, but it'd be nice to just say like transform dot, as bad as it sounds, destroy children. Like there are some I've seen it on Reddit. There's things about
that's hilarious.
there is a Reddit thread about like really bad sounding things in game dev, like
destroy children.
Or like something about like bones and like animation rigging, and like destroy parents' bones and stuff, and it gets really bad and kind of funny if you've got that kind of dark really humor.
Funny. Yeah. There's got to be some artists out there who can like visualize some of these method names.
in yesterday's video, one of my examples was that, destroy children, and I had to say it with a straight face, like try not to just laugh after saying, I know, yeah, for each to destroy child.
That's where you cut to a meme of something.
Yeah.
Jason actually made a good example of an extension method, color dot with alpha. That's a pretty good one. I like that. I got to add that to my projects.
I made a string one, like string with color or something. So you,
Oh yeah,
because obviously to do it right now, you have to give it well, unless you're using one of the default colors, you have to give the RGB.
yeah, it's a pain.
There are obviously, like, I think red, blue, green, the common colors. But if you want something more specific, you have to get the actual hex code. And there is a built-in thing in the color class / script to color dot from from color to RGB or something.
Right.
But I just made a thing where on a string you can just say dot with color, pass in a color, and then now the string is colored or whatever. It's just really useful because that'll be used in any project. Don't want to have to remember to write it every time, and it's just really nice to have it as an extension method.
Yeah.
I've not read chat in ages. We've just been talking about our own stuff. I mean, I don't know if a lot of the stuff you've been saying might have been from your chat, because I forget we're both streaming, having different chats. So
yeah, no, go if you see anything in your chat, feel free to. Well, I guess this would be a good opportunity. Sorry, just to tell everyone to smash that like button, just to support your community game developer tutorial makers. God,
yeah, but both communities go check out the other person.
Yes,
we make similar content, so if you like my stuff, you'll probably like Charles's stuff, and vice versa.
Yep. All right, what were you saying about? You had something in your chat?
Yeah, I'm just looking. What would be the best experience you've had with Unity? The best experience.
Best experience.
That's a very hard question. I mean, there's experiences like making your first, this system, or making. Whoops, I just pressed something. Yeah, I'm just trying to think.
I can answer the question
you go and see yours. I'll think.
In a different way, I could say my best experience with Unity as a company is going to Unite, and I would never have had that experience if I didn't start, picking up Unity.
I guess I might piggyback off that in a second.
Yeah, and then also I guess my second best experience in general is like having this channel, and more importantly having the community that I know you have a community as well, like having this community that has grown around the content that we put out there. Like, I love it. It's great. There's so many smart and funny people who come into my Discord server and into our chats. So yeah, it's I like that. Those are my best experiences.
Yeah, I don't really want to steal that, but to be honest, when you said it, I'm like, yeah, in my own games, it's a lot of fun, but I've made so many different projects. I couldn't pick, oh yeah, that one project from a year ago, that was really good. My best experience. No, but yeah, when I started and just did some tutorials, and then started taking the channel more seriously, doing more tutorials, improving the quality of videos, and slowly over time, building up a community in YouTube and Discord. And it's just been fun, and I didn't really expect it at the start. I'm sure no one does. I remember the first guy who said like, "Oh, make a Discord server," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I have like less than 100 subs, so why is anyone going to join?" And a few people joined, and now we have like 2,600 members, and it's like, what? It's a lot more commitment to go join a Discord server and be part of it than it is to just press sub on YouTube. So even though there's a lot less people in our server than sub on YouTube, it's still like it's a community place, right? You don't talk to people in YouTube comments really. But in Discord, you can have full-on discussions with people, split up the different channels, have chats about C#, different languages, showcase your own stuff off, I like looking at the stuff people have been showing off in my Discord about what they've made. And then even jumping into other people's servers and looking in their showcase channels, because based on what kind of community they have, you see different things. I get a lot of people saying, oh, look at this program I've made and stuff. And then I'll jump in someone else's channel. Look at this model I've made, or this, yeah, it's good for inspiration, seeing what other people make, especially if they're not experts in the field anyway, because, then it's more achievable. If you see someone who's been in the industry for 20 years do something good, it's like, nice, but I have to put in a lot of time to get there.
Yeah.
If you see someone like, I've only been using Blender for less than a year and I've made this, and then it's like, wow, I can do that too. Yeah, seeing other people do stuff is quite like motivating.
Yeah, it's humbling too sometimes, just to see like someone will put something on in your showcase channel. It's like, wow, this is incredible. Like, I don't know. I'm so impressed by a lot of the things I see come through there.
Yeah, when I see people that have used my tutorials to implement something in their game, I don't even consider, like, after people have used my tutorial, I did something ages ago on like tooltips, like mousing over items in an inventory and having a window appear to show you the data about it.
Mm-hmm.
And someone used that in their own game and then put me on Twitter saying, "Hey, from this tutorial from Dapper Dino, I made this in my game,"
Mm-hmm.
and like they implemented it in their own game. So they, that's what I'm on about. Making tutorials where people can actually use it in a proper project. That's something to try and do. It's
Yeah.
not the easiest thing. I'm sure he modified it a bit for their own game. But yeah, it's cool seeing stuff from my tutorials being used, seeing like that I'm actually being helpful to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's weird because
It's a
that's the
weird
entire
thing,
point
right?
of, yeah, it's like the entire point of my channel is to teach people, and yet I'm still like surprised when I've taught people. you know, I'm like, wait, you learned something from my tutorials? What? Like,
Well,
that's not what.
doing this, like you're kind of in a vacuum. Like of course you have that Discord community and like things like this where we're like we have our chat and our live stream. But then once everything gets closed down, it's just you sitting there with a camera, or you recording yourself alone talking to yourself most of the time. It's interesting how you could really be in a vacuum, and like when you put out that video, I mean for me it's like I put out the video and personally I like step away from it completely.
Oh, same. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I just don't.
nope.
I'll like reply to comments for the first like couple hours, but
Yeah.
sometimes I look back on videos and I'm like, wow, I have no recollection of creating this.
Yeah, I'm sure I could do the same right now. Yeah.
It's funny.
Or I see a comment come
Yeah.
in, a notification. I'm like, did I make that video? I did, but and then the thing is, I'm a bit hesitant about helping because I'm like, you probably know the video better than me. Honestly, you just watched it. I haven't done anything with it in a year.
Oh yeah, it's sometimes you get like a really pointed question like, "Hey, why did you do this at 4 minutes?" And I'm like, "Oh great, now I gotta watch
I'm
this
like,
whole video again just to answer this comment."
I'm like, what did I do at 4 minutes? I don't know.
That wasn't me.
Yeah.
That was past me. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist anymore. I got a question on my chat here.
Yep.
Spiky Danto says, "I am a complete noob, particularly at C#, but want to learn. Where should I start?" So someone had asked earlier in your chat, I believe, how to get started with Unity. This is a
I
question
think it's
about
the same answer,
C#.
really.
I think it is. So I guess a lot of it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, and I imagine because you're sitting here watching us talk about game development in Unity that you want to create games. So where you start is if it's that, you choose small projects that already exist. So you can choose a game like we said Snake earlier, or maybe Tic-Tac-Toe, or something really simple. And then with a combination of reading documentation, watching tutorials, reading tutorials, however you learn best, do your best to just implement those games. And I would say don't get hung up on the details. Just do your best to just get from start to finish. And even if it's like really ugly at first. And then what you need to do is you need to follow up on those things. I think that's something we didn't really mention last time is when you get from the start to the end of a project, try to do a retrospective, and look back on the decisions you made, and try to look back on the code you wrote, because that's how you get the most experience, and that's how you really learn. I guess that's a kind of a broad statement to say, or generalization, but a lot of the times you learn from just making mistakes, and from that experience, you can grow, because it's one thing to just read documentation or even just to watch a tutorial. It's another thing to be able to take what you learned, or what you saw in that tutorial, and then to apply it. Because once you start to apply it, once your fingers start moving over the keyboard, that's when your brain really activates and you're like, okay, wait, now I got to make a decision about this here. And I think sometimes you make mistakes and you learn a lot from that.
Yeah, sometimes you're like too deep into a project and you learn something new or a better way of doing something. And depending on the size of your project, you have to weigh up, is it worth going back and redoing what I've already done? Or do I just finish this project and start a new one and then, use the new thing I've learned in that new project?
Yeah.
I've had that problem in the past of, oh, let's just go back and change all of that stuff. And then, at least with GitHub and source control, it's not too bad, because if you do mess everything up, you can at least revert it. But yeah, always learning new stuff. I see a video like, hey, this pattern's useful for this. And then 2 months down the line, I might be like, wait, I found a way that I think's better about this. And if I do a video on it, then someone might be like, but hey, you said 2 months ago this. And I'm like, yeah, but everyone's always learning. I'm always learning too,
Yeah, for sure.
Everyone you watch, no one that's doing tutorials knows everything and is done learning, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially when there's always new stuff coming out as well.
Yeah.
It's like there's no perfect tutorial on how to make a game. Like I don't think anyone expects that. Maybe some people do, but don't.
Yeah,
Don't expect
it's like
there to be a perfect
a tutorial on how to make a movie, you know, like there you can actually, I think there's a lot of similarities between being like a game developer, someone who wants to create a game, and someone who's like an indie movie, what do you call that, an indie filmmaker
director. I don't know.
they're like, you know, you might have a vision for making your own indie film, because you know that's a, you know, indie game development, indie films, those are two kind of parallel fields, I think. And if you think about a film, it's a very collaborative experience. I mean, you gotta know about screenwriting, storytelling. You know, that's one aspect of it. Then you got to know about acting. That's another aspect of it. You got to know about lighting and like blocking your scenes, composition of a shot. Then you got to know things about editing audio as well. You know, color correcting, color grading a shot, you know, to get a theme throughout your movie. And then at the end of that whole pipeline, then if you're actually going to get your film compiled and then sent out to like Sundance or into a movie theater, you got to know how, you know, how the different formats you want your movie to show on. You got to know how all that plays into your project as a whole. So I think it'd be like saying, "Oh, I want a tutorial on how to make a movie." Well, think of all the things that I just listed. All those things go into game development as well, you know, in one way or another.
Just from working on my own projects, I've learned so much stuff I never expected to learn.
Yeah.
I'm happy about it. You know, when I started, I thought I can make games just by coding, and it's like, nope. I've got to learn how to do modeling, even if it's just making basic shapes. You know, even if it's just making some basic stuff in Photoshop. Some like simple sound effects. I mean, yeah, you could make your game without, you know, using models, just use primitive shapes and without audio. But you know, it's better to make some like bad audio yourself and kind of learn a bit how it works, than just like going and taking someone else's stuff. Like even if you're not making your project public, you know, just go and download some sound effects you found online and use them in your own personal project. It's still better just to go and find some software to make your own. I use a BFXR quite a bit. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I haven't used it myself, but yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah, I can't remember where I heard about it from, but it's really simple. There's just some preset sounds, but even then, they're not presets. They're like types. So like there's a hit sound effect, and if you just keep pressing the hit button, it gives you like a variation of a hit sound effect.
Oh, nice.
But you have loads of sliders for changing every little bit about the audio, and it seems like it's made for retro kind of sound effects, but a lot of indie games are that kind of style, you know. No one's gonna on the indie project that's the thing. Not everyone's a programmer. I always have the programmer view of making a game, but there's some people who want to make games who are just artists or just musicians, you know. Not just programmers want to make games, you know. Other people exist too that want to make games, and that's their problem. They're now coming like, I want to learn programming, or like I need to learn programming to make my game logic, but I'm not a programmer at all. They've got to start at a different place to someone who knows a bit of C#. I was considering in my like C# beginner thing, do I do what are variables, what are classes, what are methods? But people were like, don't bother, you know, just do the more Unity specific scripting stuff, because there's already tons of stuff about like just how to get started with coding. You know, people can start there, and then once they know what variables are, classes, functions, then they can start with the Unity stuff. Like, okay, how do I use those basics in Unity? Well, here are the callbacks, like the update method. This gets called every frame, and people will see and be like, that's a function, because I remember from what I learned. And then I can put some logic in my function, and now the thing flies, or whatever you do. I feel like when you start, maybe don't even start making a game as your first project. Maybe just make like a playground project where you can just mess around, you know, like just stick components on things and have
pick things up. Definitely.
And then like learn the editor, because there's so many buttons and windows and things. There'll be windows now that I've never seen before that have been there all the time.
Like that timeline window that you always remove from your project. One day you're gonna actually use it and be like, oh wow, this is.
I have to learn that at some point. Yeah, I know the basics. I've seen a YouTube video or two on it, but I've never really found a use. I think one time I tried to use it and then gave up. So I'll try again at some point. Also earlier on, I know you were saying, oh no, there's a question in my chat about like best experience of Unity. Like you said about the Unite thing. So I haven't been to Unite yet, because I mean, I don't know how expensive it is to go. And back in the past, I mean, I'm only 19 now. I finished school last year, like high school. UK, I mean, every country's different,
Hmm.
but I couldn't really, I didn't have the money to go and like travel just to go to Unite thing. I would have loved to. Obviously, I can justify going now. I don't know if it's going to happen this year. I hope it does.
I hope so too.
But I did go to another event that you were invited to, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or
And
something. That's a shame.
I know.
Like, we would have,
we would
but
have met.
yeah, at that event, that was one of my best like Unity experiences. If we were on about like experience of Unity as a company, because as we were on about earlier with you're in your isolated box on YouTube, I didn't realize that these other YouTubers watched my stuff. I was like, there'll be some beginners watching my stuff, and then no one higher than me like knows that I exist. But then I'm like, wait, like Saiku Sam and Mix and Jam and stuff, they all know who I am. I'm like, what? And then obviously getting invited to that event, meeting everyone as well. I mean, I don't know if Roman's still in the chat, but I met Roman there, and yeah, we would have met, but that we'll save that for another day. I mean, when is Unite normally? It's August, right? Or is it?
I'm trying to remember when I went. I think it was October when I went to in LA.
I'd be surprised if it was on a normal time, because even though most places are going to by that time have relaxed isolation, like they're not going to have got rid of it, and
Yeah,
public
no, I don't think
public
so.
gatherings are not going to be back on. They're like the one thing you don't want to do.
Everyone's going to be joining in on VR. They have like
we'll
VR.
just go to yeah, that would be really good for them showing off like
yeah, right.
stuff.
Unite, now developed in Unity.
Yeah.
the whole conference. Yeah. Yeah, was that a cat I just heard?
There are sounds. I've shut my windows because if I don't shut my windows, then there'll be sounds. But apparently there's still sounds anyway. Yeah, my windows are shut.
Because I have cats too. I was like, is that my cat or your cat?
I don't think it's even my cat. I think it's just sounds outside. That's the thing. Animals are running wild now, without people being everywhere. And like
they're running
cars,
amok.
Yeah. Those meetings are such an energy boost for motivation.
That's awesome.
Roman saying like, yeah.
I'm motivated too. I'm ready to go like play with UI elements and mess around with some things we talked about after this.
Is Roman on about Unite or the thing? What was the event even called that I was at the other time? I think it's called the hack. They call it like a hacker weekend. There was barely like, that's not really relevant to what happened. It was more of just a, meet the other content creators and we also met some of the devs and they taught us about like certain things. So HDRP, there's a bit about ECS and dots, and they were like optional things we could go to if we wanted to, because obviously if you're an artist and you're not programming, you don't want to hear about dots. It's kind of confusing. And so yeah, some people just went in around the office and a hacker weekend.
That's cool, man. Yeah, hopefully they'll do that again once this gets lifted and I'll be able to make it out to that.
They said they're going to keep doing them, and then they'll basically be inviting like the channels that are relevant to what they cover. So this one was about dots and ECS as well as HDRP. So if your channel's all about like visuals, rendering, graphics, then you got a chance. And then also dots and stuff. Even some of the people that don't really do dots. But that's the thing. They want to get people who don't do dots into dots. So they're not just going to pick people who do dots content. Because obviously they want to move people over to it.
I have to do like a quarterly dots video to cover whatever the latest thing is. Because I did like a Unity ECS series back in like 2018. Yeah, and for a while I became like the de facto ECS guy. But then, obviously everything in those tutorials is I tried to keep it high. It's funny, I tried to keep it high level and discuss like as an architectural pattern what ECS is, but still a lot of the code that's in there is now defunct.
Changed, yeah.
Yeah, so
that's because they're constantly trying to make it easier for people to use. Yep. So if you, I mean, it's been a while since I've actually written any ECS code. I remember they've made it, if you've got like a simple system, they've made it like even easier to write. Like you don't have to define your like job struct separately and schedule.
You can do entities dot
for each,
which I love. That's all. I think I did cover that in my latest dots video, or I did a job system video to show how you could use the C# job system outside of ECS, because I think there's value in it. There's the multi-threading aspect is great. And you can still use people. I don't know if people realize that you can still use multi-threading with the C# job system without using ECS. So I think that's something that I'll probably cover more of.
Well, I've heard about it. I've just not wanted to mess with it as of yet. Anyway, maybe I'll consider it. But it's one of those things where when you're making a game, you don't want to go overkill. Like you don't want to, like with ECS, a lot of people seem to think it's overkill. You know, it's only good for if you have a million things flying around. But I think it's just the design pattern as well that is what makes it interesting to me.
Yeah.
I like the whole fact that if I want, I don't have to get stuck in inheritance trees if I want weird logic from composition. I understand Unity right now is composition based. You know, I mean, it's a component system engine. You make components, you stick them on things, but it's like if you want, there aren't really systems in Unity. It's not really a thing right now, unless you're on about ECS.
Right. Yeah.
If I want my player to take reduced damage, well, if I want that to be a possibility in my game, if I want things that can take damage to be able to be reduced, then I need like the health system to have reference to the stat system. In ECS, it's one of those things where only if you have a stat system does that even matter. You don't need like a reference or checking if stuff's null because the systems only work on what they are about. Like right, I don't know if I explained that well. So like right now, if you've got a take damage method and it
Right.
takes an int and subtracts your health, okay, and then you want to add damage reduction, well, you need to code in there something saying like go to the stat system and check the fire resistance and then subtract it from the damage coming in. If in ECS you don't have that check almost, it's just you have a system that exists that processes.
That's what's great about it, because it's that control flow, and that's an interesting thing that, you know, is hard to grasp with ECS. And it's one of the things I like about it is that things are more implicit, meaning, you know, with a player, let's say you have a player, you can add a component to that player, and by virtue of that entity, the player entity having a component, then all of a sudden some system will turn on, so to speak, and work on it. And then what you can do is if you want that behavior to be gone, it's not, you don't have to like set a Boolean like, oh, don't do this anymore. You just remove the component, and then now the system won't do any work on it. So all those if statements that you typically have to do, and all that control flow logic, it's more a matter of saying, look, hey, I'm gonna put a component on a player. If it's there, the system will do stuff to it when I'm done with that. You know, like for instance, how about this? Let's say like you have a burning effect or a poison effect. You know, you might have like maybe you have a Boolean called is poisoned, you know, and then all of a sudden when it is poisoned true, you have an if statement where you're like, okay, now apply this damage or something to that effect. But with the system, or with ECS, you have that player entity, and all you have to do is add the poisoned component, and the poisoned component could have like a DPS property that's an int that says how much damage per second. Then you have that system now operating on that component on the player, because now the player has the component. Then when they're no longer poisoned, you just remove the component, and now that logic doesn't get processed anymore. And I do like that sort of implicit control flow.
So one thing about that is, it's like with ECS, there's even more steps you can take to make it, I guess, better. It's more effort, I guess, at the start. But so you said like poisoned, you attach the poison component, you take damage. But then, you know, someone comes along like, what if I want poison and then burning? It's like, well, they both do the same thing, but maybe with different effects and different, you know,
right.
You know, you don't want like to then make loads of different component types for all the different like damage over time effects. You almost want like a damage over time component that then has some data. So yeah. And the thing is, like they were saying when I was asking some people at this Unity event, I was giving that example of if you have different damage types, at the end of the day in dots you want like the minimal data. You'll just want to have almost like a database of different effects, like burning, poison, decay, whatever, and then each of those has their own ID. So then you just tell the damage over time component, I want damage over time ID 2. It's like, oh, I know I'm burning. Or if you just say 3, it's like, oh, I'm poisoned. The only problem is then, what if you're poisoned and burning? One of the things about ECS is you can't have 2 of the same component on the same entity. That's when you need to start looking at buffers, because a buffer of something basically means it's like a list, really. It's different to a list, but it works in the same kind of way. If you want to have incoming damage you have a buffer of damage, because multiple things can hit you in the same frame.
Right.
And you want those different damage instances to be separated, because imagine if you take 10 fire damage and 20 water damage, you don't want them to be like just added together and be 30 something damage. You want them both to be processed separately. So that's why in the buffer, you'd buffer that. So you have like 10 water, 20 fire, or whatever. And then when it comes to the system that actually subtracts from your health, then you can do a normal loop over a buffer. So you say, all right, buffer first element, it's 10 water damage. Let's subtract, the damage. And that's when you can then make a damage reduction system that says like, well, I take 50% reduced water damage and loop over the buffer. This first bit of damage is, whatever water damage, let's halve it. And then that system's done its job. All I need to do is loop over the buffer and kind of modify the damage to be reduced. And then by the time it actually gets to the system that subtracts from your health, the damage has already been processed, like the reduction. If you wanted to do that now, you would have to say in the like health thing, go to the stat system, read this value, come back. But then what if the thing doesn't have stats? What if it's just a box, like a box in your game with health? You don't want to have to set up like a stats thing on a box, because presumably it can't, equip armor or have buffs and debuffs. It's just a box that has health.
Right.
In ECS, you just wouldn't put a stats thing on it. You just stick on a health component. But right now, you then have to maybe do null checks and just not bother adding that component and not setting it, and then say, well, if it's not null, then go grab the stat. And then we said that leads on to the problem of your code base is just loads of ifs. If that thing is referenced, then use it. If not, then just don't.
It's definitely a hugely different way to approach, the whole architecture of a project. And that's one of the things, that I stress, that there's nothing wrong with ECS. It's just the one thing I would, want people to realize is that if you decide to use ECS in a project, you have to go all in on it. Like you're using this paradigm, so you better understand it. So there's nothing wrong with it, though. I mean,
speaking of understanding it, like I'm not saying I understand it fully right now. There's plenty of things I was, making work, but probably doing it wrong. And that's why I think for Unity themselves, they don't want to make their own tutorials about it right now, because they know it'll change.
Yeah.
And because they are Unity, they are quite often the first place people go, or like the place people go to get the best information, because they know the most about their own thing.
Yeah.
But that's why hopefully by 2020.1, like when it's actually released properly, that's when they say it's stable. That's when the API is not going to change much. I don't really know what it means when they say that.
Much.
Yeah,
it's
much,
like,
much
okay.
good. Yeah. But hopefully then is when they start making their own videos on it. And also other content creators, right? I mean, I learn sometimes from other content creators to then make my own videos, and people don't really see it as, it's not really a copying thing. It would be copying if I recorded their video and rehearsed like doing the same thing back.
Yeah, everyone has their own style of teaching, and
but it's at the end of the day, for me to teach something, I have to have learnt it somewhere,
Yeah.
And that person you watch, they have to have learned it from somewhere, and then that person, it goes on forever. Like teaching is just like passing information down to more people.
Yeah.
So everything's
and then I'm gonna have
sense.
to teach to my alter ego Barrels how to use ECS at some point. So it's just like, it's recursive. It's collapsing in on itself.
You're gonna start going crazy at some point.
Oh yeah, if I'm not already. Should see my wife when I start recording these. It's hilarious. Oh man. Well, we've done an hour and a half, and that's I think this was a great conversation. I had a great time.
Yeah. I'm just seeing if there's any short questions.
Let's see if there's any last minute questions coming through in the chat. In the meantime, be sure to smash that like button. I think we came up with a funny little like programmer, like invoke the like function. But yeah, thank you all for being there. Did you see a question in your chat there?
There's some people saying that like one person says they want to start their own devlog series. Do I have any advice on starting a YouTube channel? Well, in my case, I just made the channel and just started uploading some rubbish, and that's how you get going. I mean, obviously, some people make high quality content from the start, but at least in my case, I didn't plan on doing this seriously when I started. It was a kind of side thing, so I didn't care about thumbnails. I just uploaded some Unity stuff. It wasn't even tutorials at the start. It was just showing my own stuff, really. Just like, here's something I made. Bye. Like, I didn't even talk in my first videos, I don't think. Yeah, just make the channel, record what you've done, and you'll get people that are interested in seeing it. People love looking at other people's games, especially game devs. Post it on Twitter and Reddit. Maybe those are the best two places to get feedback, in my opinion, on your own stuff. Obviously, you're already posting it to YouTube, so that's one place. And then I know I didn't wait until I was that big before I made a Discord server. I mean, I'm not big anyway, but I was at less than 100 before people said, make a Discord server so we can all chat and show stuff off and talk about game dev, or even in other people's servers, you can find like maybe even just start off sharing in other people's showcase channels, maybe build up some interest there. Because I think even like with Twitter, some people can just share one tweet about something that looks really, really cool and they blow up. Like if they make something really cool. Have you seen some of that like procedural animation stuff?
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff.
I'm like, I've never seen the code behind that, but it always looks really interesting. I know it's a lot about physics and like inverse kinematics, and I keep saying one day I'll look at it, but for now I've got too much on my plate.
It's actually not as complicated as you'd think. Believe it or not, the code. Yeah, it's just he does a couple ray casts, and then based on that, he'll place the foot down, and then I think you just call some inverse kinematic function, which affects everything in the joint, the bone up to the main bone. But as long as your model is rigged correctly, what correctly means, don't ask me. The code is very simple.
Two programmers talking about animation and modeling. Yeah, let's try and avoid.
Yeah, right.
All right.
I guess my advice to that question was, it depends on what you're trying to get out of it, because you really can get a lot of different things out of being on YouTube. So I think you could be like, I guess what Dapper Dino and I are trying to do, Nathan and I are trying to do, is in a way sort of be like content creators, to be influencers in a way. But maybe your whole approach is you're just trying to have a place to market your game. Or maybe you're just trying to have a place to build your portfolio. So like, I think if you're trying to do what we're trying to do, you need to be consistent. Like if you're trying to build an audience, build a community, and be an influencer, so to speak, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, at the Unity event, they were calling us insiders because they also found influencers as pretty cringy and has a
super cringy, yeah. But
a bad like.
I can't think of any other, but insider's good. Thin Matrix is another example. Thin Matrix, like everyone knows him. He's got a channel. He's got a community. So if you're trying to go down that route, I would say 100%. The key is consistency. You have to post. I would say pick a time. It's crazy, but like pick a time that you're gonna post once a week. Maybe it's twice a week.
Usually works for that. Yeah.
Then be consistent.
It's also just high quality as well.
Yeah, high quality.
Quality over quantity.
Yeah.
I obviously still try and have the quality there. I don't rush the videos, but I still try and keep them regularly, Monday through Friday. It's because with programming and game dev, there's so many things. My first concern when I wanted to do Monday to Friday was I'll run out of ideas, but there's no way I'm running out of ideas. There's always stuff I can
There's always
do,
something to cover, yeah.
Or even just recover that I've done a long time ago.
Yeah.
And answering people's questions. It's always like, if I see someone ask something and I know how to do it and I don't have a video on it, I want to make one, so that there will be a day when someone asks, or like, well, no one can ask me a question that I haven't covered,
Yeah.
I'll have covered everything, at least programming.
So that'd be my advice. Just be consistent in your timing of your videos, and also be consistent in how you're the makeup of a video. And that'll probably take time to figure out. Like, if you look at Thin Matrix videos, his videos are always like kind of in the same sequence. Like he gets started, he discusses what he's gonna do, and then he'll go out for a run and make some tea, and then he'll come back. Yeah, so it's like, but it's pretty predictable, and it's predictable in a good way. I mean, like I have come up with some sort of formula, whether or not that comes through. But when I am writing or creating my next video, I always know it's like I'm gonna start off. Barles is gonna be there, typing away, and he's going to hit some problem, and then he's going to call Jason or Charles, and then that's how it's going to progress. So like I think, and then you have your videos have a particular cadence to them as well. So that takes.
It's usually I just usually say what we're going to be doing, and in the background there's usually like a clip of the final product kind of showing.
Yeah.
And then depending on if the video is complex enough, I'll have like a steps, like for step 1 we'll be doing this, and I'll have timestamps. So I'll say like people can get a rough estimate of how long I spend on in Unity, like messing with variables and references and setting the scene up. as opposed to like how much the video is programming.
Right.
And then there's a bit at the end which is about usually testing and showing it working in Unity. If it's a really simple short video like I did one about coroutines, it's literally just jump straight into the coding. It's like a coding video.
Right.
So that doesn't really need to be split
You're
up.
bite-sized, right?
Yeah. I think people have been really liking that, so I'm gonna keep going
cool.
definitely with that.
Yeah, so just find your formula, and you might have multiple formulas. Like you've got your bite size, and you've got your standard video that's a little bit longer. Like there are you can have multiple formats. Even I have multiple formats. I'll have videos where I'm just like chatting to the camera, but figure out what that looks like and just be consistent with it. Those are my
You've got to try a few different things to see what works, but you don't just like do one video for each different thing you're trying, because that's not enough to know if it's working. Like if you've got an idea, do it for a week. Is it working? Yes or no? Well, if it's not, then maybe try something else. But if it is, just keep running with it. I mean, people like short videos on YouTube. They like to learn things quickly. So if you want to appeal to that, then short and informative. Maybe if it's a coding video, cut out the actual typing most of the time. Like don't just copy paste some code and say, don't just copy paste the code and say, here it is, it works. But at the least, if you do copy paste the code, go through and explain what it all does, each line by line. The problem when typing is it makes the videos longer. You might slip up on typos and stuff, and then you just there like,
you should see how I edit my typos. Like I literally get to the frame where like I type the wrong thing, and I'll cut out everything in between me backspacing, you know what I mean? So like if you ever watch me typing, it looks like I'm the perfect typist, but I'm definitely just
like flying around everywhere.
I cut that up like a madman. One day I'm gonna do a time lapse of me editing a video, and you'll just see me like spending so much time on the coding part.
I hate when you're typing something and then some random class that's like 20 words long. It's like, oh, you meant this, and then it just like messes up what you're typing with the IntelliSense.
Yeah. What is whenever you do like a list, it'll grab the bool. There's like some bool library.
I can't remember any examples right now, but
bool.lang. It's like, oh my gosh, why?
It's like, I thought they said they're doing like they're using machine learning for IntelliSense now or something. At least in Visual Studio. I haven't noticed much of a difference, to be honest.
That's funny.
Yeah, the person said, thanks for the advice. I'll try to be as consistent as I can then. Yeah.
Cool, man.
We're glad to hear back from you in a future stream, hopefully, and see how it's going.
Yeah, let us know how it's doing. I'm curious.
Yeah. All right. I think that's, should we end it there?
Yeah, I think that's the good stopping part there. Thank you all again for joining. Thank you. Thank you, Nathan. And
thanks, Charles.
Go watch us and like our videos. And I'm sure we'll be doing this again sometime. I'm not sure when. So just to speak to my audience, or I guess our audience now. Yes. I had been streaming weekly. With this, I hate to blame it on the quarantine, but with this quarantine thing, my work has ramped up like crazy. So it's been kind of tough to do it, but I think I'm getting to a place of normalcy now with it. So hopefully I'll be back to streaming weekly, and of course I'll have Nathan on with me like this in the future soon. We'll have to figure that one out.
Yeah, we'll schedule the next one whenever that is.
Yeah. So keep an eye out for that schedule. It'll be on our channel pages, and we'll catch you all later. Thanks.
All right,
Thanks,
see
guys.
you, everyone. Bye.